Before we begin, let's have a look at these questions. Do you ever think that Islam contradicts with the women's rights? And do you believe Islam oppresses women like how the media portray? And in your opinion, as well as in your experience, do you agree that Islam considers women as inferior compared to men? Yes? No? Maybe? Alright, so all of those questions reflects the issues involved around the women's status in Islam that Islam has always been dealt with but cannot fully satisfy, or the critics from the non-Muslim as well as by the Muslims sometimes, and especially those who hide under the name of liberation, women's rights, and feminism. For some reasons, Islam and Muslims have always been targeted and cited as extreme and unfair when it comes to women. Because of those misconceptions and stereotypes on how the Islam views women, Yusuf al-Qaradawi, a very well-known figure amongst the Muslim community, he wrote a book with the title Cannot Be Clearer Than Ever on the issues around the women, the status of women in Islam, and this book is more than an informative and precise explanation on the status of women, but is also give an in-depth answer for the controversial questions that raised by the Muslim, also by the non-Muslims. For an overview about this book, what is discussed within the book is already stated in the title, the status of women but in Islamic perspective. And to be more detailed, the status of women here consists of 10 main concepts which represent not only different roles, rights, responsibilities, how women should be treated in general from Islamic point of view, but it also discusses on the women's rights in very specific situations such as polygamy, divorce, inheritance, blood money, and so on. The content of this book is not only to discuss and answer questions involved around the women's status in Islam, but it's also to defend Islam from the misled accusation by the West, at the same time to correct the misconceptions from Muslim communities. There's a very beautiful comment on Yusuf al-Qaradawi that I think also relevant to the book that I am talking about. The comment is like this: Qaradawi stood out for the splendors of his reasoning, the strength of his arguments, and his courage to tell truth to powers. And this comment is cited from the article named Remembering Yusuf al-Qaradawi after the death of these scholars. Here are the 10 main points from the concepts. And from now on, I will split this presentation into 2 parts. The first part will be the brief summaries about the content, and the second part will be the personal evaluation opinion on the content of this book. And I will put the timestamp in the description. Before I jump into the summary, I have to say that the content of this book is not that unfamiliar. So anyway, to the first point, the women as human being. Under this part is focused on the fact that in Islam, women is equal to men, and they both created to serve different purposes. However, it doesn't mean that men have the right to consider themselves as superior to women. The second point, refuted misconception. This point serves as a defense for Islam on the skepticism such as the male privilege over female, on dealings such as legal testimony, inheritance, blood money, leading of the state, and so on. The next point, which is the women as feminine being. This part shows the views of the Islamic views and how and why Islam protect the femininity of the women, since femininity of the women is a very important, an indispensable element in the human lives, as well as the masculinity thing. And everything created by Allah needs both femininity and masculinity to work properly. The next point is the legitimate mixing between male and female. Under this part is discusses on the legal and illegal practice, the legal and illegal mixing between both gender. For the legal one, the legitimate one, They mostly serve the purpose of gaining knowledge and performing obligation to Allah. And for the opposite side is more that like leading the women and the men into the state of being intimacy, or it opens room for indecent and haram behavior. The fifth, the sixth, and also the seventh point, which discusses about the rights and the responsibility of the women under different roles like mother, daughter, and wife. All of these roles are very honorable and cherished in Islam, and Islam establishes like teachings and rules in order to protect these roles, the rights of these roles for the women. The eighth point, which is divorce. The book stated that divorce is acceptable in Islam. However, Islam does not encourage divorce because sometimes it violates the happiness of the family and also the construction of the society. So teachings and rules are there to limit the abuse of divorce. The next point, which is polygamy. Under this part, polygamy also acceptable in Islam due to the nature of the men. However, it's being criticized a lot by others. But actually, the book argued that polygamy is a very human system because it protects the women as well as give the man the responsibility that he have to follow if he want to practice polygamy. And the last point, which is the women is a member of society. Islam never teaches the Muslim that women should be kept at home all the time. Women can like go out and seek for the knowledge, since seeking knowledge is an obligation of all mankind in Islam. And the women also can work as long as the work does not violate the teaching of Islam and is not violates the nature of the women, such as the motherhood or the femininity and such. There are two main issues that I draw from after finished this book. The first one is the abuse of Islamic teachings, and the second one is women have been influenced to fight for things that contradict our own rights. There are two issues, and these two issues answer for the question of how women being treated in this modern society. For the first point, the abuse of Islamic teaching, to be honest, from the perspective of someone who does not have a strong foundation in Islam, and as a woman, I have many concern and questions on the teachings and practices of many Muslim leaders and communities. Like, I believe Islam is a very pure and good and equal religion to the women, but why there are so many Muslims out there, they do the reverse, but they said what they do is correct according to Islam. For example, the practice of polygamy. Like, there are so many Muslim men out there, they practice polygamy, but some of them are not even be able to bring the equality for all of their wives, emotionally, financially, or whatsoever. They are more inclined to the women, the wife that they found more attractive. And they claim what they do is acceptable because Islam accepts polygamy. That is how they are abusing the teaching of Islam, since they just care about the parts that is benefits for their interest, for their lust, and they totally ignore on the teachings, on the obligations and the rules that they have to obtain if they want to practice polygamy. And the books also stated that a man should not have more than one wife if he cannot make sure that he is able to be equal to all of his wives, and that could lead to a sin. And another example is the right to ask for the obey of the women on the husband command. That is not a wrong thing. However, a lot of men, they abuse that right. They ignore on the responsibility that comes together with that right. For example, the basic responsibility of a husband is to provide his wife everything, like basic things for a living, and be the maintenance for the family. However, in reality, in this modern life, women and men are equal in everything, especially in finance. So some men still ask the women to go to work at the same time, be good at the household things, kind of like cleaning, cooking, taking care of the children, and etc. That is not how Islam teach the Muslims. And this book is like a protection for the women from being used by men by letting her know that what is her rights in some certain circumstances. And for the second point, which is the women have been influenced to fight for things that contradict her own rights, that is with the ongoing trend with the feminism, many ideas and rights being asked for the good of the women. However, along with that are many misled rights that being bring the negative effects on the women. For in the book, under the part of women as feminine being, it is said that women should avoid, protect herself from evil such as lust, materials, disregard of her dignities and honor, and so on, because femininity is a treasure for a woman, and Islam values a person based on their virtue. But there's a trend going on right now is that the fighting for the freedom of having sex. And it's argued that why men can have their rights to have sex freely, but women would be judged if she asked for that kind of freedom, and when they and then they fight for that. In fact, this is ridiculous since it also benefits for the men. So like the men can easily sleep with the women but do not have to perform any commitment, and if there is any consequence, the women will be the first to bear the consequence. For example, being pregnant but the father of the children already fled. And also for the polygamy, people nowadays have sympathy for adultery but blindly criticize human systems that secures their rights. From those 2 points, we can clearly see in reality, women are no longer being treated as right as how she should be treated. The roles of women no longer be cherished, such as the motherhood, and the nature of the women is being destroyed. Generally, this book, The Status of Women in Islam, can be a very useful guide for the women, obviously, to let them know their rights so they could protect themselves from over-dominant male who would like to over-control her life, and to keep herself from the evil teachings by the bad people. In my opinion, I do not think the book has any major weakness that need to be improved. However, I think at some parts it could be taken out of the context and be cited or used against the Muslim by the anti-Muslim, because Islam and Muslims already have a bad image illustrated by the media, and that is the big disadvantage of the Muslims and Islams, because the audience will easily to criticize the thing that is already illustrated as bad. And I hope you get the point that I want to say. Like the materials, the teaching and practices of Islam and also this book are easily to become the target of to be manipulated by the bad people. And another concern, which is the fear that this book will be forgotten by later generations. To be real, if it is not because of the assignment, I might not know about this book and other masterpieces of Yusuf al-Qaradawi. And the Muslims communities themselves need to preserve and promote the such helpful materials like this book by their best. Maybe learn the West, the way that they promote, that they spread their philosophy, their ideas, their cultures and such, probably. And go to the end of this presentation. I have to say that before reading this book, I would feel somehow persuaded by the depiction of the West about Islam, and then after finish the book, I have done some research on the critics of Islam, and I found so many negative articles which cited Quran verses and interpretation in a very ignorant way. However, I just feel them being so ridiculous and so lack of knowledge by accusing Islam like that. So the point here is it's so important to know clearly what you believe so that you will not doubt or feel offended by what you know is totally untrue. And this book of Yusuf al-Qaradawi is a material that will satisfy your curiosity and your concern that you do not even realize until you reach the last page of the book. I will not compare this book to any other religious book from other religion because I believe each religion will have its own rights to establish some kind of rules and teachings. And it's also not necessary to bring any other material to uplift this book, The Status of Women in Islam by Yusuf al-Qaradawi. And that is all from me. Thank you for taking your time and I hope you have a great day. Waalaikumsalam.